Welcome to another session of Stelmo's Rants and Raves. I'm Stelmo. Let's just jump right in there. So, a number of things to talk about here today. Uh, and I don't even know where I want to start, other than, I guess, let me start at the best place, the thing that's been festering now for far too long. The operation that was going to take 2 weeks, I think that was the beginning story. And then secondary story was the only option is unconditional surrender. Yes, that's what President Trump informed us in the early part of this war that continues to go on unabated. And, the president is back to making these threats. And I think these threats make him look very, very weak. I think he's playing into our enemies. Look, the president has already said that these people cheat, they lie in the negotiations, they enter into agreements, and then they violate them. And all I'm going to say is, Mr. President, this has been going on for nearly 50 years, and there are plenty of advisors that should have been telling you this. Why you think that suddenly you're going to be different is beyond my ability to comprehend. These people are religious zealots. And I know that there are so many people out there that want to attack people who say that, but it's the reality. And we need to look at the reality of this situation because it is a very serious thing. So not only is our president making threats, but so are the Iranians making threats. Now, I want to hope that most of this is nothing more than an attempt uh, to halt the president's attacks currently occurring against Iran. Uh, but but keep in mind, these people, there is no way that Donald Trump is going to scare them into an agreement. Now, they might enter into an agreement, but I think what the president is going to find is the same thing has happened here. And so what's happening is the Strait of Hormuz is virtually closed. Yeah, there's some traffic, but a minimal amount of traffic going through there. And oil prices are back going up. And from what I gather, the amount of spare oil located around the world is rapidly diminishing. And soon there are going to be some explosive increases in price, which is really going to send inflation in this country up through the roof. And that's why prolonging this thing, I just don't get. Now, I have heard that the president has said that he's going to have this attack. That's the biggest attack yet. It's so big. It's gonna. I don't know what it's going to do. But I'll tell you what I'm tired of. I'm tired of hearing that we destroyed everything that they have because it's obviously not true because they're using military apparatus and devices to cause pain on America and on our allies. So it seems to me that the only rational thing is to end this, and the only way to end this is to take out the IRGC. Now, I realize that may require some boots on the ground. But let's get it and get it done. I don't think the president realizes that he may be going down in history as the president who caused the fall of the United States of America. Now, I know I'm going way out on a limb saying that. But look, it was now, I want to say 3 weeks ago when Donald Trump had the emergency cabinet meeting. After it concluded, we were told that he was taking away some tariffs on some products that were either fertilizer or used in the manufacturing of fertilizer. And the reason is because he was being told, I suspect, by his aides that, hey, the price of this stuff is going up as its scarcity becomes all the more the prevalent factor. So we might have lowered the tariffs, which helped somewhat. But the problem is the Strait of Hormuz, the fertilizer is not getting through. Everybody always concentrates on the oil, but other important products go through the Strait of Hormuz. It was now I'm going to say certainly a month ago, probably 2 months ago, we were hearing about how in India, they couldn't purchase enough aluminum to manufacture enough aluminum cans that they needed for for Coke and Pepsi and the like. And come to find out, the aluminum that they generally purchase came through the Strait of Hormuz. Now, okay, they can use bottles, I suppose. There is another alternative. But these things are all playing havoc with the world economy. The president was lamenting the fact that he was talking about a worldwide depression. Well, you're only making it worse, Mr. President. Things are not what you're trying to make people believe. And when it comes to the economy, you just can't lie to them. They live it every day. They know what's going on. Now, one of the things that I am going to say is I have seen the prices of a few things finally start to come down. But I think it's a supply and demand issue. Like, for instance, watermelons went from 9-something to 4-something, 4.67. They are now in Walmart for a seedless watermelon. And, at that price, I buy them. 9-something, I don't buy them. And so, yeah, people are tapped out. They only have so many dollars. And as they have to spend more dollars on gas and insurance and on cars and homes and all the other stuff that's necessary in life, they just have less that they can purchase. And as a result, even though in many cases you may see an increase in the dollar amount of products being sold, the problem is overall it's less products being sold because those that are being sold are costing that much more than they had been. And I heard it said that I think it was 21% was the percentage of inflation during Biden's 4 terms. Now, if anyone wants to buy that number, be my guest. But as a shopper, I can tell you that is so far from the truth it isn't even funny. And there were other things that we heard, and I don't know, I heard quite a few Republican pundits talking about how that the tariffs were not causing any increase in prices. Well, let me tell you what, in my Walmart it did. Yes, sir. They announced those tariffs, and bada bing, bada boom, prices went up. And yes, some of the prices were going up 35 to 40%. But of course, we were told, no, that's not happening. But it did happen. And they like to brag about how they got the actual inflation down somewhat. And that is nice, but keep this in mind. A product that used to cost, let's say you buy that Biden number at 21%. So if something costs $1 before Biden, it costs $1.21 after Biden. And so before Biden, it was, this is a rough concept for me to try to explain here. But what you have is you have an inflated number. And so the fact that the inflated number is now going up slower is really meaningless because the number is so much higher than what it had been. And you're not going to bring these prices down. Now, some of the problems, I believe, are caused by, how should we say, the Republican Party. I've said it before, and I'm going to probably say it many, many times in the future, but I live in a red county in a red state. And yet we have a $14 an hour minimum wage. So if you want to go to Dairy Queen, let's say, for example, and I use this as an example because we have one Dairy Queen that's virtually on the verge of closing because people can't afford the price of ice cream anymore. And I think, or let me put it this way, I have noticed that in Publix, the price of ice cream has come down. So that's a positive thing. But again, I think it's because it had been so high, people just weren't buying it. And so people are just tapped out. Their wages have never kept up with inflation. And then I read these headlines about how, socialism and how bad it is and everything. Well, let me tell you, a lot of people are finding our current system bad right now because there are so many problems within this system. And the reason is simple why we're having all these problems. It's $40 trillion in debt with no end in sight to this doom loop of debt. Not only do we have to borrow more money in the trillions every year, but we have to borrow now. I think it's just $1.5 trillion extra just to pay the interest on the money that we didn't have, that we borrowed, and now we'll pay interest on it forever. So that things that might cost $1 will ultimately end up paying $10 for it. And a lot of people think this is okay. They're out there. We're being gaslit, and when is it going to stop? I saw another headline that said that Marco Rubio has closed the gap in New Hampshire between him and J.D. Vance. And I say, well, I just heard J.D. Vance, I don't know, it was yesterday, the day before, but it was fairly recently, where he was saying the problem with the Epstein files was it was communication, poor communication. The administration didn't get out in front. And, okay, Mr. J.D. Vance, if you want to buy that, go ahead. I don't think the voters are going to buy it. I think the voters know and realize now that there is a multi-level law enforcement program, I'll call it, here in the United States. Donald Trump was the victim of a multi-level justice system. So you think that he might be against it, but apparently he's saying, nope, he's all for it. Because he went from, we're going to release the Epstein files on day one, to, I'm going to say probably 80-some%, if not 90-some% of the voters out there think that the full Epstein files haven't been released. They don't buy that for a minute. There are all these alleged videotapes, and we're told that they contain minors, and because of that, they can't possibly release them. Well, why can't you tell us who is in there besides these minors? See, that's the problem. Too many of our elected officials find it so easy to hide under the, I can't comment on that, that's an ongoing investigation. I mean, it may be an ongoing investigation that's doing absolutely nothing, but they're going to leave it open so that they don't have to actually tell the public the truth. And yeah, this is problematic because people distrust the politicians. Now, the Democrats have already made clear that if they're ever in a position again where they have power, they're not giving it up. They're going to pack the Supreme Court. They're going to do away with the filibuster. They're probably going to be like Nicaragua and do away with elections too, because they do not like the fact that they have to constantly run because the voters aren't smart enough to realize that these politicians really have the people's best interest in heart. And just people don't buy that, and it's sad. I don't see our way out of our many predicaments. Is the problem? How are they ever going to get our debt under control? They're not going to. So at some point in time, and I think we're already there, where the Fed and the Treasury are manipulating things to hide from the public exactly how much of our debt that we've had to purchase because there's nobody else willing to purchase it. If you go back, I'm going to say, let's say two decades ago, back then, we had a debt problem, but it was much more manageable. And actually, I'm going to say where things really went over the top was with the pandemic. And you have to wonder how much of that was part of the reason they had a pandemic. And this is something we don't know, and we're probably never going to find out because they don't. The Trump administration, DOJ, doesn't seem any too willing to start prosecuting too many of these people that were involved in the unnecessary murder of millions of people. When I was in school, we were taught that it takes 100 years before an accurate portrayal of history can be put out. And the reason they claim it takes so long is to make sure that all of the interested parties are no longer around and able to influence things. But, when history is written about our time, I think the big point that they're going to be making is how come people weren't doing anything about all of this? And that's a really, really, really good question. I saw another headline the other day, and I don't remember too much about it, but it was talking about they were touting something one of the ex-leaders of the Tea Party was doing, or at now recently. And when I read this, I'm saying to myself, well, you see, that's the problem. The Tea Party was a grassroots movement that did fine up until the fact that they decided that they were going to have leaders, and naturally you had people who were going to try to, I'll say, usurp the voting pattern of the Tea Party members to advance their own political careers, and that was a death knell for the Tea Party. And it's a shame because the politicians in both parties were so terrified. Politicians are always terrified of grassroots movements. Always, 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 always. They fear the people. And I've seen, living a long time, probably the two greatest examples that I've witnessed of grassroots movements taking control of situations was one with Boris Yeltsin in the breakup of the Soviet Union, assuming power in Russia after, a large grassroots movements of people demanding a change. And then the best one to me was in Romania, where you had Nicolae Ceausescu. Hope I'm saying that right. It's been a long time since heard anything about these people. And I think his wife's name was Elena. But they found themselves outside of their secure buildings out in a grassroots movement. And they were shouting to these people that they were going to be doing good things for the people. But the only problem was they had been doing for too long bad things for these people. And these people wanted no more of that. And so neither one of them made it through that, how should we say, their acquaintance with the local population. They both lost their lives, okay? They became candidates to be put on a gurney and taken to the local mortician because the people had enough. So politicians know what happens in many grassroots movements. And I, for the life of me, can't understand why we don't have any here in this country, because there was a pandemic and they tried to kill, well, they did kill millions of people, and they tried to kill millions more. And I believe that the actual pathogen didn't cooperate with them as much as they had hoped. And so I don't think it was as effective as they would have liked. And so I'm absolutely convinced that they're looking for plans B, C, and D. And they may already have been shipped out into whatever. You know, when I was young, I lived through the debate about capital punishment. You know, they had outlawed capital punishment, and then, you know, a lot of states started to realize, hey, wait a minute, we got people committing these most heinous crimes, murdering countless people, and we got to do something about it. And it's just, I don't know, it's just, it's shameful how these things are going on these days. Well, sorry for that brief interruption, but I had to collect my thoughts. As I've said many times, I have this short-term memory problem that I believe is a result of my having those 2 injections that they put into me, that I took certainly under false pretenses back in the pandemic. And this is the gift that it gave me. And a lot of other Americans, I believe, are also going to be suffering this same malady because, well, I read a peer-reviewed doctor-written study that said that people who took the shots as they age, they seem to be having a large increase in brain problems. I get my health care through the VA, and I can say that the neurology department right now is understaffed and overworked. And again, it's because there are these problems, and of course the press and everyone else is not really talking about this as much as they should be, and the public is just, I don't know, they're sheep. What can I say? They're willing to accept this. I don't understand how young parents, knowing that people are out there that want to see their family sent to the mortician, are just willing to accept this. It defies my ability to comprehend. So here's another headline. Now, this one, I mean, these things all aggravate me, so I don't know. Here it is. Jack Smith hit with criminal referral for lying to Congress about spying on lawmakers. Well, guess what? This is not Jack Smith's first referral to the DOJ for criminal activity. And what has happened? Nothing. And if you probably ask them, they would say, it's an ongoing investigation, and we're not going to comment on it because we can't. And it'll just stay that way until eventually people forget about it. You know, I blame Republicans for much of the problems that we suffer through in this country. The Democrats, look, they're the lunatics. They make no qualm as to who they are. They tell us who they are. Of course, we should believe them. Too many on our side say, oh, no, they don't really mean that, when in fact they really, really do mean that. And, we need to be careful because, and a lot of these socialists, they're showing their true colors. They're already talking about the physical damage that they want to do to people who disagree with them. And I'm not going to repeat, there's just so much history as to what happens. And the reason is simple. Socialism doesn't work. And so once you get a strong socialist leader, he knows that his days are numbered, unless, of course, he rules with an iron fist. And that's what's happening now in Nicaragua. No more elections. No local election. There's no need for any elections because they know what's going on. And here in this country, we have all of this crime, all of these lawmakers committing crime here, crime there, and none of them being charged. And does anybody think that our country can survive through this? I saw something where some Republicans now are coming out and saying if they can just cut 1 point whatever trillion worth of fraud every year, that we could get around to balancing our budget. Well, where the hell have you been all these years? See, this is the part that really gets me. And I don't hear enough people talking about this. But where are all these Republican legislators who have oversight over these departments who had no clue what was going on? Why are we paying them the kind of money that we pay them and add into that all of the money that they line their pockets with that they shouldn't be lining their pockets with? But it continues. It continues. And I feel sorry for the president. He had a bad pick in Jeff Sessions. You wouldn't know. I thought it was a brilliant pick. I said, oh, great, a law and order guy. This is going to work fine. But somehow they can promise Jeff Sessions, Bill Barr. Boy, wouldn't it have been nice if we'd have known back in the day, right before the president nominated Bill Barr, that we knew that it was his father who gave Jeffrey Epstein his first job teaching. And let me point out that Jeffrey Epstein didn't have the qualifications to teach those young students. And you can guess what happened. And so Bill Barr was raised in this environment. Of course, we were all ignorant of it because the press didn't put this out. The alternative press didn't put it out. And it wasn't until his term was over at some point when we found out about this. And I was like, you know what? You just can't make this stuff up. It's really, really sad. And I just don't know where we're going. Or actually, I think I do know where we're going. It's just not going to be a pretty picture. There's going to be anarchy. The whole thing is going to come collapsing down. And everyone will be saying, hey, how come nobody said anything or anything? And, the writing's been on the wall for years. We have been spending far too much money. And we keep doing things by raising minimum wage, and we think that somehow that's going to solve a problem. All it's going to cause is for merchants and people who have to hire the low-level employees that are getting minimum wage. They got to raise the price of their whatever it is they sell. And so we have the inflation. And that's why it's a doom loop. And nothing right now is being done to change this. And so it's only going to get worse exponentially as we move forward. And it's not going to bode well for the people in this country or anything. I just hope more people, you have to start becoming more vocal. You have to be calling your local representatives or sending them an email or text message or however you contact them far more often. Let them know why you're displeased. And before anyone asks me the question, let me say that my representative is, and his name is going to avoid me right now, but anyway, he's good. And what I can say is he's the best I've been down here for decades, and he's the best we've had. He's very active. We hear him often, and it's not just that he communicates directly to us, sending us emails and the like, but he also makes the rounds with the various media places. And so we can see him out there and about doing his job. And unfortunately, there are too many of these elected officials that need to be unemployed. But unfortunately, even in red areas, they will keep reelecting these loons that tell them one thing when it's time for re-election and then do something different. And as long as voters are willing to keep them in power when they lie, they have no incentive to do anything right. And right now, the country goes on. We keep spending all this money we don't have. We're involved in a war that's costing us a lot more money that we're going to have to borrow. And I'm not convinced that even now we're fighting this war to win it, knowing all the damage that's going to be created by it. But of course, once again, the government is lying to us. They're telling us that the inflation has come down and everything's fine and dandy. Yes, I have admitted that I have, in shopping, seen some products that have decreased in price. But I've also seen a lot of products that keep going up in price. So 6 of one, half a dozen of another. And, I'm fortunate. Not everybody is in the same. I wonder how some of these, especially like young people who don't have, let's say, independently wealthy parents, I don't know how these people start out in life anymore today. You need several thousand just to rent a one-bedroom unit? Come on now. I seen the other day where people buying cars, they're underwater in the cars they're trading in. So they're having to refinance money that they never paid off. And look, in a previous video, I went through this. I'm not going to go through it all again. But, years back when we started with the credit stuff, because keep in mind, in my grandparents' day, it was considered sinful to borrow money. But they weaned the people from that. And you see everything. You see President Trump. He's thinking one of the solutions to the high prices of homes is 40-year mortgages. And I guess if people want to pay it for 40 years, they can. But I think most people are going to say, hey, enough is enough. And what is it now that people are financing with automobiles? I heard 84 months. Like 8 years or 7 years. It just, cars, especially if you use them any amount, aren't lasting that long. And so I don't know. We're in so many of these doom loops, and nobody seems to be working to fix any of them. We can't even get a president to end this war. Mr. President, it was going to be 2 to 3 weeks. You can't even say 2 to 3 months now. And hopefully it's not going to be 2 to 3 years. And you got to keep this in mind. You ran being the president who wasn't going to get us in these endless wars. So I don't know how the midterms are going to turn out. I would like to hope that people are going to hold their breath and go in there and vote for the Republican candidates. Not that they're necessarily the best option. Well, they are the best option. They may not necessarily be forthright in doing the things that they may say they're going to do. But we know what will happen if the Democrats take over power. So I hope. But, there's going to be apathy. Donald Trump, in his first term, he worked to try to give us all his campaign promises. And we were able to see that he either got them all or where he failed, it was because of someone else, not him. This time around, we haven't seen the gold in Fort Knox. Although Basent came out recently, yeah, it's getting election time, and he's, oh yeah, there's over $1 trillion worth of gold in Fort Knox. But they can't show it for whatever reason. Nobody believes the Epstein files are complete. You know, we had Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, both of them get upset because people call them liars. Well, they are liars. And there's plenty of proof that they're liars. And we found out long after they lied that they knew about it, because when subsequent paperwork was released, they themselves put in about seeing the orange jumpsuit in view, only partially in view, because they were trying to hide from the camera. But guess what? They got caught. So everyone knows Dan Bongino and Kash Patel lied about it. And of course, they get upset, and they think that by getting upset, people are going to say, okay, well, we're not going to say you lied anymore. Well, guess what? I'm going to say you lied. Because I'm going to tell you where I'm different than a lot of other conservatives. I'm willing to lay the blame on those that are on the right of center just as much as I do those on the left of center, if in fact it's warranted. Now, there are people, Representative Brandon Gill is a prime example. A man, good man, doing his job. He's trying to expose a lot of the problems that there are in Washington. But, you know, our backs are against the wall right now. We've got multiple doom loops going, and nobody's looking to solve any of them. I don't know how they're going to be solved. I don't know that they can be solved. And it's just going to be a scary situation going forward. And I will be here giving you my rants and raves on it. If anyone has any questions or comments, please feel free to put them down below. And in the case of any questions, I will do everything in my power to answer them. And with that, I wish you all a good day. Stay safe. Bye-bye.